All right. Welcome back, everybody. Uh, Long time no see. I don't think I've done a podcast since the Micah Parsons trade, and that's been several lifetimes ago at this point. Um, what a crazy season we have had. A very weird season. I won't go through all of it, but with the playoffs starting this weekend and in the middle of the college football playoff right now, with Ole Miss playing Miami in the Fiesta Bowl, I felt it prudent to do, and with Black Monday and all the head coaches getting fired, I thought it was prudent to do a podcast or an episode. And I'll start off. I don't want to recap everything that's happened this season, but one thing, or a couple things I'm going to talk about before I get into the matchups and preview the postseason. This has been a very strange regular season. You saw a lot of teams come out of nowhere and put it together, win the division, and you saw teams regress. Like the two number one seeds last year, the Chiefs and the Lions missed the playoffs. Won a combined 15 games. Um, But then you had teams like the Broncos who won 14. You had teams like the Bears who got out of the cellar. Patriots, got back to winning the AFC East. The Jags kind of came out of nowhere, won 13, won 13 games, and then the Bucks reign in the NFC South ended, and the Panthers won the division, which was a surprise. I didn't see that happening in the preseason. So it's been a very strange season. And one thing I did want to note, I think a big reason for this is the strength of schedules just are terrible for some of these division winners. Uh, and I wrote about this on my blog. The average strength of schedule, and when I say strength of schedule, I mean your opponent's win percentage. The average strength of schedule this year by the division winners was 468. That is the seventh lowest. It's the lowest since 2020, and it's the seventh lowest since the NFL expanded 32 teams in 2002. And on top of that, I believe 7 of the top 10 teams in terms of luck ratings, you can look that up, are either division winners or playoff teams. I think they're division winners. Um, which is, again, I think, some of you may be thinking, like, where's he going with this? Well, I think that means that there's a chance, I could end up being wrong, but there's a chance that the top of the league and the division winners aren't that good, and that the records are inflated. And I lean toward that being the case. Again, maybe I'm proven wrong here these next couple weeks, and we get chalk the entire postseason. But I think these playoffs are going to be very unpredictable. When I visited my dad last week in Massachusetts for the holidays, he asked me, what do you think of this NFL season? And I was like, man, I don't know, because I don't really buy the teams at the top. The Broncos have been too fortunate. They've won 11 of their 14 games have been decided by a combined, I think, 47 points. I think the Patriots have played too soft of a schedule. I do think the Jags are somewhat legit. And then the AFC North, I don't think the Steelers are that good. I think the Texans are pretty good. The Bills, I think, are pretty good. And the Chargers, are good but are banged up. And then in the NFC, I think the Seahawks down the stretch separated themselves as the team to beat in the NFC, hence why they got home field advantage. But for most of the season, I thought the Rams were the best team, and here they are as the top wild card. And then other than that, like, I don't really buy into the Bears that much. I don't think they're a legit contender. The Packers are too banged up. The Eagles can put it together, but that's a big if at this point. They haven't put it together all season, but like if somehow they get uh, the round ball in the round hole, and it all clicks, I think they're going to win the NFC. But again, that's kind of a big if at this point. And then Panthers, I don't buy. I think the Rams are pretty good, but they have a long road to get there. So anyway, I say all that to say, I think I wouldn't be shocked if this is one of those seasons where we get a wild card team in the Super Bowl, maybe even two wild card teams, although I don't think that's ever happened. But it wouldn't shock me if I'll I'm not I'll say the Texans, but I'm going to give my reasons for why I don't think that they'll get there. But it won't shock me if like the Texans, the Bills, the Rams. I'm gonna throw the Packers in there. I know I'm biased, but I'm gonna throw them in there. Just you can't count them out. The other wild cards, I don't see making that deep of a run, but the others I think could get hot. But again, the stars would have to align for most of them. So this should be a very entertaining few weeks. I think it's going to lead to a very unpredictable uh, postseason, and I'm looking forward to it. A lot of good storylines going in. I looked it up. No head coach has won two Super Bowls with two different teams. I'm sorry, one Super Bowl with two different teams. From what I saw, and I could have sworn that another coach had won a Super Bowl with two different teams, but that's not the case. But that's what Sean Payton's going for. According to Google AI, that is not the case. And, once I started thinking about it, I'm like, I think it's right because Bill Parcells won two Super Bowls, but both with the Giants. He took the Patriots to another Super Bowl. Dick Vermeil took two teams to a Super Bowl, but only won a Super Bowl with the Rams. Andy Reid has taken two teams to the Super Bowl, but only won, he's won three, but won all three with the Chiefs. So it's interesting how this is going to shake out these next few weeks. But I'm looking forward to it. So I want to talk about the matchups. I want to start with the Texans at the Steelers. Last I checked, let me pull that game up real quick. On FanDuel. Wait for it. So right now, the Texans are a 3-point favorite against the Steelers. I want to make a note of something before I get into all these picks. I was doing a ton of research going into these playoffs, and I've come to a couple. I've done so much research dating back to the offseason of what to expect from teams that do this and whatnot. One of them is point differential. So it's something like 18 of the last 23 Super Bowl champions posted a point differential of plus 120 or better, either the year they won the Super Bowl or the next year. And there are, I believe, there were 5 teams last year, and one of them did win the Super Bowl, and the Eagles. And then there are 4 teams this year. I believe those 4 teams are the Seahawks, the Jags. I'm forgetting 2. Seahawks, Jags. I just said it the other day. Now I'm going to look it up on ESPN. The Patriots, the Jags, the Eagles, and I'm sorry, not the Eagles, the Seahawks and the Rams. Those are the 4. So then when you factor in the 3, of the 5 teams that did accomplish that the previous year or last year, 3 of them made the playoffs this year. The Eagles, the Bills, and the Packers. So if you're a fan of one of those 7 teams, I think you got a pretty good shot. Going by this logic that I have. And then another one is run defense. It's something like 14 of the last 23 Super Bowl champions had a top 10 run defense. And then the 2 together, again, those are 2 variables that I value. And the Texans have a really good run defense. But another thing that I looked up was I wanted to know how many indoor teams have done well on the road in outdoor games in the playoffs, which would mean a road game. And the numbers were pretty staggering. So there have been 86 teams that have 86 indoor teams that have played an outdoor game, at least one, maybe multiple outdoor games in the playoffs. So these would all be road games. And I didn't include Super Bowls because that's a neutral site. but there have been 86 teams to play at least one road outdoor game in the playoffs. Some have played as many as three. And those teams, I believe, sent that number to James, who I didn't even ask to be on the podcast today. Who, by the way, James had a baby in the fall, so good. I'm happy for him. Let's see. So, okay, so all this is from 1970 when the leagues merged. So, since 1970, there have been 86 indoor teams to play at least one outdoor road game in the playoffs. Like I said, excluding Super Bowls because it's a neutral site for the most part. 7 appeared in the Super Bowl, with 4 of those 7 winning it all. However, only 4 have won 2 or more outdoor road games in a single postseason. And only 1 of those 4 has done it since 1978, which happened to be the Colts in 1995. In general, indoor teams have a record of 30-78 in outdoor road games in the playoffs. So, what does that mean? It means the Texans, the Chargers, the Rams, Niners, Packers, Bills, yeah, those 3 have a very long road to go to make the playoffs, or to make it to the Super Bowl. And history says it's not going to happen. Like I said, it's happened. One indoor team has won more than one road game in the playoffs since 1978, and it was the 1995 Colts who lost the AFC Championship, didn't get to a Super Bowl. The teams that we've seen win 3 straight road playoff games since the turn of the century are the Steelers, outdoor team, Giants, outdoor team, Packers, outdoor team, and who's the 4th? The Bucks, outdoor team. So, Texans, Chargers, Rams, not in a great spot. However, Steelers, Texans, even though I just said that, I like the Texans in this spot. I just look at the matchup, and I feel better about the Texans' offense against the Steelers' defense than I do the Steelers' offense with a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers going up against a Texans' defense that is excellent. And Pittsburgh's the Steelers' offensive line's not great. I think it could be a big day for the Texans' pass rush. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to be special, and I don't know if he can do that. I don't think he's done that in back-to-back games this season, so I'm going to rely on the Texans. And also at this point, I think DeMeco Ryans is a better coach than Mike Tomlin, so I'm going to ride with the Texans. And then Bills and Jags. This was the toughest game to pick this weekend. I think the Jags are legit. I just think this is a bad draw because you have a Bills team that's loaded with playoff experience. They have to have, I think they do have the most playoff experience in the AFC. And the Jags, on paper, match up well with the Bills. The Bills, the key to beating the Bills is to slow down their rushing attack and run the ball well, because Buffalo's defense has been pretty mediocre and has struggled to stop the run. Well, the Jags' offense, not great at running the ball, and their defense on paper is the number 1 rush defense in the league. However, they have played only 2 teams that rank in the top 10 in rushing offense this season, so I think that number's inflated. The Bills' rushing attack is a different animal. I don't know if the Jags are up to the task. I also trust Josh Allen more than I do Trevor Lawrence. So I think it's a coin flip game. If the Jags win, I'm not going to be shocked. I wanted to pick the Jags to make the Super Bowl. I do. I am a believer in the Jags. But also, rookie head coaches don't fare well in the playoffs. I don't think a team has won. I don't think a rookie head coach has won multiple playoff games since 2008. And I'm sorry, 2009. Rex Ryan. So it was back-to-back years, I think. John Harbaugh won 2 in 2008. 2 back-to-back playoff games, lost the AFC Championship. And then 2009, I think these are the only 2 instances. Rex Ryan and the Jets won back-to-back road playoff games and then lost the AFC Championship. So, where was I going with that? Anyway, rookie head coaches don't fare well in the playoffs. So, I am going to rely on the experience of the Bills. but I could see this game going either way. And then Chargers, Patriots. I don't love the Chargers in this week, which is odd because I'm a huge Jim Harbaugh fan. But I don't know if the Chargers are up to the task of winning this game. Again, I just said indoor teams on the road in the playoffs, outdoors don't fare well. And I don't know if the Chargers can pull it off because of that. Along with, these are two coaches that have physical teams. They like to run the ball. This is going to be a very physical game. And it's probably going to come down to which team is healthier and which team is tougher. And I think that advantage goes to the Patriots. The Chargers just are banged up along the offensive line. They've struggled against good pass rushes. Vrabel's a defensive mind. I think he could dial up some pressure to get on Justin Herbert, who, by the way, has not played well in 2 playoff games in his career. At home, I'm going to ride with the Patriots. I'm somewhat confident in that. So then let's shift gears to the NFC. Let's start things off with the Rams-Panthers game. I'll be surprised if the Panthers win this game. I know that when these teams played in November, Panthers won. However, it took a lot for that to happen. I believe the Rams turned the ball over 3 times. I think weather was a factor. And the Panthers still only won by a field goal. A lot of things went their way. And I don't expect those to happen this time around. The Panthers just aren't dynamic enough offensively. Bryce Young's not effective enough as a thrower of the football. The Panthers don't have much talent defensively, but the one thing I will say with the Panthers is that they are very well coached. I think Dave Canales has shown he's a good coach. Ajiro Evero, their defensive coordinator, has done a really good job with not a lot of talent. Just the Rams are more talented. They have more playoff experience. They have the better head coach. They have the better quarterback, more talented roster. I think their pass rush is going to be able to get after Bryce Young and make things difficult for him. And I expect a Sean McVay coach team to not turn the ball over 3 times again in this matchup. So I'm going to take the Rams. I expect them to cover, but I could see a scenario where the Panthers keep this close, but I'll be pretty surprised if the Panthers win. Niners at the Patriots. Niners at the Eagles. The Niners feel like a team that ran out of gas a while ago. They are banged up defensively. They haven't been able to stop the run for weeks. I know that the Eagles haven't been great this year. They're just not the same. Jalen Hurts doesn't look the same. Saquon Barkley hasn't been as effective. The offensive line hasn't been as effective. They've been off. But this is a game I expect them to just lean on Saquon, win ugly, grind it out. Because I don't think the Niners are going to be able to stop them. I think that, even if Saquon's averaging 3.5 yards per carry, has a stat line of 70 yards on 20 carries. Keep feeding him. I don't think the Niners are going to be able to slow him down. I expect a low-scoring game. Maybe Eagles win 23-13. But I have a difficult time seeing the Niners winning. They are too banged up defensively. Christian McCaffrey and or Brock Purdy is going to have to be Superman to win. And I don't trust Brock Purdy outdoors in cold weather. So give me the Eagles. And then last but not least, my Green Bay Packers going into Soldier Field and playing the Bears. Another coin flip game. I am going to take my Packers, although I don't like it. I just don't trust the Bears. This Bears team hasn't been in this spot. This is their first playoff appearance since 2020. First home playoff game since 2018. I know that place is going to be rocking, but it's not like the Packers are going to be afraid to go on the Soldier Field, a place where they have won. I know that they lost this year, but I'll get to that game in a minute. They have won. They have only lost in Soldier Field 1, 2, I think 3 times since 2010. They're not afraid to go in there. And I can't help but thinking that when the last time these teams played, the Bears needed an onside kick and overtime to beat a Packers team that, whether or not it was for the entire game or for the majority of the game, that Packers team didn't have. Jordan Love, Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs, Zach Tom, Micah Parsons, Evan Williams, Devontae Wyatt. I just named 7 frontline guys for the Packers. If you listed, did I say Josh Jacobs? I think I did. If you listed the top 10 players on the Packers roster, probably 6 of those guys are going to be in there. And the Bears needed an onside kick and overtime to get the win. Uh, I can't shake that. I think I don't believe in the Bears. I haven't this year. I think Ben Johnson's done a really good job, but they've played a weak strength of schedule. They've been very fortunate in one-score games. Their defense really isn't that good. It's very opportunistic, but I'm a firm believer now that turnovers are mostly luck, and that luck runs out. You're this whole not getting serious until the fourth quarter. The Bears have done all season. That luck's going to run out. Their turnover luck's going to run out. Yeah, I mean, all this stuff I've said, it changes come playoff time. And the Bears are inexperienced, and the Packers have been there. I know they're banged up. My biggest concern is that Ben Johnson's going to be able to run the ball, which he will, and stays committed to the run, and the Bears run up and down the field on the Packers. I think that's the way they win, and they keep Jordan Love off the field. And I also am concerned about Jordan Love coming back, who hasn't played in 2.5 games. So he's going to be rusty. How effective is he going to be? I'm going to bank on him. And in a game where both defenses are struggling, I'm going to lean on the better head coach and quarterback combination, which I think is Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur. So those are my picks this week. Oddly enough, they're all favorites. So probably going to get at least one wrong. I would imagine so. But those are my picks. I wanted to let's talk Black Monday. Almost said college football playoff. I'll get to that. Black Monday. We have, this is, I got some dude chirping at me on Instagram. Because dude. All right, whatever. I'm not going to respond until after this week's game. I believe last I checked, we have 8 games, or 8 jobs open up. And I'm trying to pull that up. So those jobs are the Cardinals, the Falcons, the Ravens, the Browns, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Titans. So I'll start things off with the Cardinals. Cardinals fired Jonathan Gannon. Not a huge surprise. 3 straight losing seasons, I believe, with the Cardinals. And the Cardinals are in this weird predicament where I was listening to, I believe it was the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and they were breaking down like what kind of offseason will it take for the Cardinals to right the ship, and like what they needed to do going forward to right the ship. And they got on the subject of Kyler Murray, and I kind of scoffed at the idea of trading Kyler Murray until they mentioned that basically, if they're going to move on from Kyler Murray, which there's always been smoke that they will, it basically has to be this offseason. And, to be a little crass, they got to shit or get off the pot. And so I kind of expect the Cardinals, now that they've moved on from Jonathan Gannon, to probably move on from Kyler Murray as well. But, and then enter a rebuild. So, but to Jonathan Gannon, I don't think I don't know if he's a bad coach. It felt like the team tried hard. Things just didn't go their way this year. They lost several one-score games early, and then once Kyler Murray missed like 3 or 4 games, I felt like they did quit. And 3 straight losing seasons isn't going to get it done in the NFL. So I would be interested to see what happens to Jonathan Gannon in his career. I would take a chance on him as a defensive coordinator, but I doubt he gets a head coaching job this cycle. And then the Falcons with Raheem Morris. And they fired their GM, Terry Fontenot, which I'm like, Terry Fontenot, like, whether or not however, I don't know what to make of Raheem Morris. He's already been fired as a head coach before this. Had a good run as defensive coordinator with the Rams, but not great with the Falcons. What really killed both Morris and Fontenot was Well, I mean, the decision everyone's going to point to is the decision to sign Kirk Cousins to a big deal and then draft Michael Penix in the first round in the span of little over a month. That probably was the nail in the coffin, but for Fontenot, it was. I believe he might not have been the GM, but I know he was the one. I believe he was the guy who drafted. Um, Now I'm blanking on the names. Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Michael Penix all in a row. He might have drafted Kyle Pitts too, but like that stretch right there is what really did the Falcons in. In 2021, they could have had Micah Parsons. 2022, you know, yeah, instead of Drake London, you could have had. Let me pull up the draft real quick. Uh, and you can nitpick every draft pick, but this is the case with the Falcons. In 2021, you could have had Michael Parsons. 2022, you could have had Charles Cross would have been a good pick. A lot of wide receivers went early, but Jordan Davis was picked after Drake London. You could have had Kyle Hamilton. So, and then 2023, they picked Bijan Robinson. I don't necessarily blame them. A lot of people thought Bijan Robinson was the best player in that draft. And I can't really fault a team for just going BPA. However, I don't like a bad team drafting a running back because you're just wasting mileage on him. By the time you get good, he's already taken a beating for 2 to 3 years. So I just don't love that philosophy, but I get it. But Jalen Carter was picked right after the Eagles. Now I don't think he would have been the same player with the Falcons, but my point stands. I'm looking at some of these other guys. Christian Gonzalez would have been a good pick. Jack Campbell would have been a good pick. Elijah Cansey would have been a good pick. And then 2024, I know for sure that Dallas Turner was on the board, who everyone thought was going to be picked, along with who was that defensive tackle? Was it Byron Murphy? Um, so the Falcons just have mismanaged their assets. I'm not surprised that they're stripping it down, and I would look for them to be and probably move on from a lot of guys this offseason. It's not a terrible job. James and I were talking about that this week. It's not a terrible job. If I was a promising head coordinator, I would listen to the Falcons. But yeah, it's not the top job on the market, obviously. But it'll be interesting to see how the Falcons handle this offseason because quarterback position remains an issue. And then the Baltimore Ravens. This is the biggest story probably of the coaching carousel. Uh, Baltimore Ravens move on from Super Bowl winning head coach John Harbaugh. I honestly think it was time. Sometimes this just happens. No offense to John Harbaugh, I think he's a good coach, but sometimes you just need to part ways. Either the relationship has gone stale, the locker room has gone stale. Sometimes you just need a new voice. Look at what the Packers did with Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur. I know Matt LaFleur, everyone's going to argue he's coaching for his job right now. I don't believe that. I don't think Green Bay really believes that. I think that they'll sign him to an extension this offseason. I'll be surprised if they don't. But that transition, you go from Mike McCarthy, who had stagnated for 3 or 4 years in Green Bay, leaves. They bring in LaFleur, and they immediately compete and get to 2 straight NFC championships, host or have home field in 2020 and 2021. So sometimes you just need this to happen. I'm very curious to see what the Ravens do. That's obviously probably the best job in the market. Um, and then this kind of brings me to the next team. If I were the Ravens, I'd go get Kevin Stefanski. I think he's the best candidate on the market. While I'm not the biggest Stefanski guy, like I think he gets a little too much praise. But like he had the most success of a Cleveland Browns head coach since Marty Schottenheimer, Bill Belichick. It's been a while, 40, 30 years. Um, you can't discount that. So if I were the Ravens, I'd get Stefanski on the phone. I think he's a bright coach. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's a good offensive mind. I think him and Lamar would be an interesting combination. And he likes to run the ball, so him and Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson would really open up that playbook. I think it would be interesting. So Then we get to the Browns. I don't know how. In the Browns are the Browns. I don't know how you move on from Stefanski. He was not the problem in Cleveland. He took you to the playoffs twice, won you your first playoff game in 30 some years. Uh, but Cleveland is going to Cleveland, and I think that I think that in the draft when the owner pushed for Shadur Sanders, which all this is out there, you can look it up. When the owner pushed for Shadur Sanders, that felt like the rift in the front office and the coach. Because I don't think Stefanski and the front office wanted any part of Shador. They did it because the owner pressed it, and now they have a quarterback room that isn't great, and I don't think they're going to be able to draft one this year. I don't expect them to anyway. So that's who they're going to have to roll with, and I don't think it's going to get them anywhere. So, uh, Raiders. This is surprising. I thought Pete Carroll was going to work in Vegas. They really needed someone who could change the culture, and I thought Pete Carroll could do that. And boy, was I off. But they were terrible. They were terrible offensively. And then I am surprised that they fired Carroll. I thought they might give it another year, but you really can't wait around. And uh, what's the owner's name? Mark Davis isn't one to necessarily be patient. Um, Raiders got the number one overall pick, so that makes it an attractive off destination for a promising coordinator. I expect them to draft Fernando Mendoza. I like Fernando Mendoza a lot as a prospect, and I think he could turn the franchise around. I don't think he's a great fit though for Vegas. Just seeing him in interviews and stuff. Um, so Raiders. I'm surprised Carroll didn't work out. I thought it would, and I was way off. And then today, the big news was the Miami Dolphins moving on from Mike McDaniel, who uh, I thought he was safe. And here they go moving on, and there were reports that they're going to go get John Harbaugh, which I think would be good for Miami. When the Miami opened up, when they hired Mike McDaniel, I thought they should have pushed for Jim Harbaugh because that was when it was right before he won a national championship at Michigan, but his name was circling for NFL jobs. I believe that was the offseason where like the Bears opened up and the Vikings opened up, the Raiders opened up, and I think Harbaugh was linked to all the maybe not the Bears, but I remember his name coming up for the Vikings and the Raiders, and he ended up choosing to stay at Michigan. And the Dolphins went with McDaniel. But I remember when the Dolphins opened up, I was like, I'd go get Jim Harbaugh. You need a tough son of a bitch, to like Miami's too soft. The colors are soft. The team is soft. The fans are soft. No offense to the Miami fans, but the weather's soft. Like they need a tough guy in there. And they didn't do it. They got McDaniel, who's not a tough guy. He did well. He did okay though. But it ended up not working out. And now they're linked to John Harbaugh, which I would really like if I were the Dolphins. I like it just as a guy who follows the NFL, because John Harbaugh is a tough guy. Those teams were always tough in Baltimore. I think he can bring that to Miami, and I think things would get interesting in Miami. However, they still have the Tua problem. They still have issues with the roster, specifically the offensive line. I think they're going to move on from Tyreek Hill. So we'll see if John Harbaugh takes that job. I'm not convinced he will. And then the New York Giants moved on from Brian Daboll during the season. I don't know. Not surprising. I was more surprised that the Giants kept Daboll last year, but I would give Daboll another shot. I don't think he's bad. I think a lot of things not necessarily didn't go his way, but that first year really killed him, even though they made the playoffs and they won a playoff game. But I believe 8 of those 9 wins were by one possession. Only 4 of them were in the conference. They had the worst record in conference of any playoff team in NFL history. They were 4-8 against NFC teams, 5-0 against AFC teams, and I don't remember who. who they had in the rotation that year, but that was the team. That was the Giants that year, and they had a fortunate draw with a Vikings team that had a very inflated record. Uh, but that first year kind of sank Dayball. It raised the fan base's expectations. It was Daniel Jones's best year of his career, and he was coming. That was a contract year for him too, and they didn't franchise tag him, so he was a free agent the following offseason. And after having a taste of success and getting to the divisional round, what were the Giants going to do? Move on from Daniel Jones? We can criticize it now, but in the moment, I didn't really blame them. You weren't going to get a quarterback with the 25th pick. Almost certainly you weren't. Even though I think Will Levis fell, but we've seen how that worked out. So then you're stuck with Daniel Jones, who wasn't great. The roster with the Giants wasn't great. Everyone knew that. The next season, I knew that was a team I said, I'm going to short this team. They got very fortunate in 2022, and they followed it up with 2 bad seasons. And now, another bad season, and Dayball's gone. I don't know where they go from here. I don't know if Jackson Dart's their guy. I'm not sure he's not their guy. It's not an unattractive job. But yeah, unfortunate for Dayball. That first year, even though he had success, really did him in. And he was, like I said, he was he was attached to the hip to Daniel Jones, and I think they tried to trade up to get one of the quarterbacks in 2024, and they couldn't get it done, and they settled for Jackson Dart last year, and we'll see how it works out. But unfortunate for Dayball. Like I said, some things kind of went against him. I think he'll probably get a job as a coordinator at worst, and I would listen to him if I were a team in an interview. I'm not sure he's a bad coach, but the Giants just aren't a well-run operation. And really, since honestly, since Bill Parcells, all they really have is Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin. They are Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin away from being really irrelevant for the last almost 100 years, closer to 80, 70, 80 years. That's kind of who the Giants have been. So, anyway, tough luck for Dayball. Tennessee Titans fired Brian Callahan during the season. Had to be done. That team was terrible. I'm not surprised I was surprised he was the first name to be fired. I'm not surprised that he got fired, though. That team was really bad, and things kind of got better after he left. And I didn't love the hire to begin with. I don't like hiring guys who, even though he was an offensive coach, and I'm all for hiring offensive coaches today, that's what the game is, but he came from a team in Cincinnati where he didn't call the plays. So you're going to have to be special, and he wasn't special with the Titans. And I believed in Cam Ward, but the Titans are another team. They're not a well-run operation. I was thinking about it last week when I was with my dad. I was like, the Titans could have Malik Willis, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Mike Vrabel as their head coach. And they've moved on from all of them. Just a really bad organization. So that's my thoughts on Black Monday and the NFL coaching carousel in general. I could talk college football playoff for a couple minutes. I'm in the middle of the Ole Miss Miami game. It's a dogfight, not surprising. I would have picked Miami to win this game before the game, and I think they're going to win this game as I'm recording this podcast. Could end up being wrong. I think Ole Miss is going to run out of steam. They've played on emotion, from losing Lane Kiffin in their last 2 games, and it's worked, but that only gets you so far. And Miami looked like the real deal against Ohio State. I was very impressed with how physical they were, how they were able to run the ball, and how good they were defensively. I expect them to pull away here. I don't know what the score is right now because I've been recording. Miami, I believe, is ahead. Yeah, they're up 4 right now. I don't know what the spread of the game was. But I expect Miami to pull away in the second half. And then tomorrow, the Friday night game, Indiana, Oregon, going to be a very interesting game. Right now, I would pick Indiana, but that's a coin flip game. I think Oregon is a really good team and really talented. Definitely, probably more talented than Indiana. I think Dan Lanning is a great coach. And the last time these two teams played, Kurt Signetti, kicked his ass, and I don't think Dan Lanning's going to forget that. Now, I will say I think Signetti's the real deal, and while almost said Signetti, Kurt Signetti. While Dan Lanning, I think, will have this game circled, I think Indiana is probably the better team. These two teams probably with quarterbacks who are going to end up going in the top 5 or 10 picks of the draft, by the way. Although I don't think Moore has decided. But going to be a really good game. I'm going to pick the Hoosiers to win. And it feels like the national championship is coming down to Indiana, Miami, which will be really interesting because those are two brands that, Miami's been down since the early 2000s. And, Indiana's a program that prior to Signetti really didn't have a ton of history. So I would be, I'm rooting for Indiana as a guy, as you see by my hat and my hoodie. I'm a smaller school, not necessarily a small school, but I'm not a fan in college football of these big brands. I root for a team from a poor state with a not, I don't know about average brand, but a tier 2 brand. And I'd like to see us get back on track as a football program. And I would like to see a program like Indiana, which isn't too different from what West Virginia, win a championship. It'll give me hope. But Indiana has one thing that the Mountaineers don't, and that's a Big Ten brand and Big Ten money and probably more lucrative donors than we have. Although with this recruiting class that Rich Rodriguez has brought in and the transfer portal class he currently has, like, clearly we're working with some money. And anyway, I look at this and I'm like, this is what would happen if the donors pony up for every guy. That's what we need. Not just ponying up when it's someone you want and a guy is from West Virginia. So anyway, that's where I stand. I won't go down that rabbit hole. Second half starting. I'll see y'all. Let's have a good weekend of football. It's good to be back podcasting. Maybe next week I can get James on. I didn't ask him today because it was kind of a last minute thing. I was at work and I was like, you know what? I really got a podcast. So have a good weekend, everybody.